Hi, this is Dave Douglas, and this is a very special edition of the Greenleaf Music Podcast, A Noise from the Deep. I'll be talking to the painter and visual artist Terry Winters. We collaborated some years ago with the choreographer Trisha Brown and her company, and Jennifer Tipton doing the lighting. We talk about some of the work we did together there, and then we get into some conversation about Terry's work, how he thinks about it, and all the influences and inspirations from music and the music he was around in New York in the 70s, 80s. It's a fascinating conversation. We're going to start with an excerpt from the beginning of our piece for Trisha Brown called 5-Part Weather Invention. This is Aerial Maneuvers and Aria 1, a piece that I wrote for Mark Feldman on violin, Guy Klusevic on accordion, and Greg Cohen on bass. Hi, Terry. Nice to see you.
Nice to be with you.
It's funny to think that the piece that we made when you introduced me to Trisha Brown was already a few years ago now. And it was such an inspiring event in my life. And I wanted to start by asking you something I've probably asked you before, and I feel like I never got a clear answer.
Oh, well, I'll do my best now.
Well, I know that you work with drafts and sketches and smaller pieces that you develop in making your full-scale work. And in the case of L Trilogy, especially the first part of the trilogy, it's a pretty sizable, it's the entire size of the stage, your image. And I guess my question is, I know how much relationship you have to dance and music and literature, architecture, other art forms. Had you already thought of that in advance in making that piece?
In terms of that specific piece and the role it played?
Yeah, like what, because I felt like as I started composing and as I started working with Trisha, seeing her choreography, I felt like your image was already there, as I remember it.
Well, I think, Trisha had come to the studio a number of times to see what I was working on. And in a sense, that drop was a response to what I felt what she was drawn to in the studio and the kind of work that I had been developing. So I began to think of her interest in those drawings, which dealt with a kind of almost abstract narrative and almost kind of cinematic development of forms, and pick an image that felt close to that and her interests, and also my desire to just sort of see something much larger in a relationship to the dancers' bodies, actual size. So it was
Yeah.
great to see people inhabit those kind of virtual spaces.
Yeah. Just as a reminder to people that the images of that production and all the other visual art we're going to talk about, you can visit at Greenleaf Music on the podcast page for this episode. And also you can visit terrywinters.org to see everything that Terry's doing. It's an amazing website. I recommend it.
Excellent.
It's interesting because I remember the first time I saw With the Lights and the dancers, I was in the pit. So the dancers were directly between me and your work. And there
Right.
was a similarity in terms of the size and the scale and the lines.
Yeah, and also just that changing relationship and how it was affected by Jennifer Tipton's lighting and
Mm-hmm.
the sequencing of her lighting in terms of the graphic impact of the imagery and its interaction with the dancers themselves.
Wow. It was a thrill. I did feel like once I started presenting the written music, I felt like I was looking at the staff lines.
Well, it plays off that a bit now about the structure of composition, the structure of a musical composition.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about how your work develops over a time scale, that you work with various different medium paints and different things that have different drying times and different reactions. Is that was that piece working that way for you?
Not so much in terms of my own imagery. I mean, that image itself developed in that way as a kind of evolving struggle to come up with a form that I felt connected to in some way. But my role in that entire collaboration, excluding my slight inputs to the timing of Jennifer's lighting, it was sort of the still point in that production, and both Trisha and your involvement and Jennifer's involvement was also sequenced in terms of the time signatures.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating for me to sit there and watch how your interactions were taking place and how that shaped and really changed that static portion of the production, meaning my backdrop.
Huh. Wow, I never thought about it that way. So you're watching your own work evolve in real time as the other elements of the piece developed around it.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think, Rauschenberg said that the lighting is the most important part of the set, and in some sense, it shapes and gives emphasis and directs the kind of narrative that the piece can contain. For better or worse, or to in one direction or another. So I think that was all changing through all of the rehearsals that were going on, because it was quite kind of an extensive series of rehearsals. Now the rehearsal time developing that piece.
Yes.
My memory of it, just from as a sort of sitting and beside it all going on.
Well, especially the first part of the
Yeah, the
trilogy.
first part. Yeah, the first part.
And after that was a little less as we all became more familiar
Right.
with how we were working. But the thing from my side, Terry, was that, I had seen that image in the studio and I had seen it in a smaller print size, but we had all those rehearsals without it really being there.
Right.
So it's only when we got to Jacob's Pillow and I actually saw it full size with the dancers in front, and that changed the way we played too.
That was the first time you saw it there at Jacob's
Well,
Pillow?
the first time that I saw it full size with the dancers and all the rehearsals that we were done were in the studio on where was that, in the West 50s. And I don't remember seeing the whole image there. Or am I misremembering that? Did you?
Didn't we do rehearsals up on 130 something street uptown? No, no, maybe in the 30s. Yeah.
We should have coordinated on our memories before
We've done some homework. We rehearsed with the full set of the full drop when we did the rehearsal uptown, wherever uptown was,
Okay.
because that's when I was first working with Jennifer on the lighting of it.
And I must have seen it earlier because I wouldn't have written this piece of music without it.
Yeah,
So,
and that hook or whatever you call it, that melody is so wedded for me with that piece and all of the movement of Trisha's dance. I mean, it I don't know, it sort of captures so much about what that piece was and what that experience was of doing that piece.
great. Okay, let me play a little bit. Even though I was wrong about our timing, this was a part of the piece for sure. Brings back a time to hear it for me.
Mhm.
Now hearing Guy Klusevic also, and just having lost him very recently,
Yeah, I know.
really brings back a
Yeah,
lot.
his contribution was just so essential to
Yeah,
the sound you got for that piece.
yeah, the sound. I remember, and I do want to ask you more about painting, but I also want to talk to you about music because I know you have a whole. It's like a big important part of your life and your work. But in to stick with the making of the visual elements, something that you've said that struck me was this idea of abstraction as a likeness. That, and it was something that when I was writing this music, was thinking about a lot. How we think of abstraction in music often as something that has no likeness, that exists somewhere in the air. And I always felt like there was a narrative, there was emotion, there was an analog to the real world in it. And it seems like that's a big, important part of your painting.
Yeah, it is a big part. Just because, I mean, de Kooning said that even abstract shapes must have a likeness.
Hmm.
I think that there's attraction that's gained through sort of the visual interpretation of an abstract image, and it's like a higher degree of abstraction where abstract forces are used to create a picture that feels real, that seems like a real world situation. And whatever that struggle is, uh, just on a biological level to figure out what it might be, that engagement and the associations and connections one makes seems to be an important part of the sort of energetic engagement with what a painting can do. It's not pictorial in the way that like a musical sound can sound like something else or sound like another form in the world. There's a different kind of pictorial recognition that can happen in abstract painting that's different.
Huh. Yeah, I guess I don't think of the music so much as sounding like something else as having emotional and narrative arc, even though
Yeah.
there's no words or.
No, I think that's definitely the case, and a kind of response to the sequencing and the patterning and the rhythm that gets created just for the piece you just played, and how that conjures up a kind of emotional response that that is happening in real time.
Do you feel like that's why you have drawn so much from the natural world, from what you've referred to as givens, maps, biology?
Yeah, it's some factual basis to cantilever off of in order to create another kind of parallel existence,
Hmm.
and a kind of equal isomorphic relationship it might have to real world facts.
Hmm.
Just in the way that the musical composition is a reality in the world. I think that these abstract images have a kind of place as a real world thing. Um, in its own sense, in its existence declares itself in some way.
On its own terms, right?
Yeah,
Right. So it's not alternative facts,
exactly. Just the fact.
its own facts.
Fact. It's its own fact.
And do you find that there's an analogy to music in the way that you think about that?
Yeah, in terms of its structure, in terms of its composition, and how it can be conjured out of the mathematics of it, out of, as Brian Wilson might have said, out of the vibrations of it.
Mm-hmm.
Those forces can form entities that we can respond to on a very equal term.
Hmm. I was looking at one of you referred to it as an early work, Good Government.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful painting. It's very different than what you're doing now.
Yeah, but in a way, that painting came out of my interest in sort of the architecture of natural forms, and one suggested things that one knew what they were, but you weren't quite sure what they were, and to
Hmm.
somehow penetrate some of the mysterious qualities that natural forms possess, and trying to get at in some improvisational way uh, through prodding and pulling and playing with them to release some kind of other kind of meaning they might have,
Hmm.
but taking that architecture as a kind of given.
You used the word improvisation, and I know that figures into your work. What I mean, I guess it must, in every phase, in every series that you do, it must operate differently.
Um, it operates differently only in terms of the pragmatics of the moment,
Mm.
but as a kind of procedural thing, I think it's basically been the same from the beginning. I mean, I'm trying to improvise and put together these in the drawing process. I'm taking things from different places and synthesizing the information in a kind of attempt or struggle to get some sense of novelty, some sense of new imagery, some new place that gets described. And that's the kind of initial phase of the first place the images are seen. And then some of them are developed further through a painting process that it ends up being similar to the drawing process, except I'm taking apart the drawings or constructing them in different ways in order to just find my way through them and find out something about how they might exist as a painting,
Mm.
different with different pressures and different stresses, whether it's
Hmm.
changes of size, changes of material, changes of color.
Hmm. So each one goes through a number of steps to get to where it's going to go, and you're improvising as each one goes through, and some might not continue, but the ones that do end up evolving
Yeah,
into the final piece.
exactly. And in every step along the way, there's some different set of circumstances that get presented.
But it's interesting to me because that's improvisation on a very very different time scale than the way improvisation works in music. Like there's four of us in a room and we're improvising together, and a 3-minute improvisation takes us 3 minutes to play. In some cases, we might stop and talk about it and do it again, but it's pretty much happening in real time. And then your improvisation could be over a period of months or years, I guess.
Well, hopefully not. No, they take as long as they take. I mean, and there's no way once I enter the process of getting the ball rolling,
Uh-huh.
I'm pushing, but I'm also being pulled by the process.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense, it's similar to a sort of like, chaotic attractors, or I'm being pulled along the process of trying to develop this images in some way. And that I'm responding not to another musician, but to the demands that
Mm-hmm.
the work itself is making on me, or my response to what's going on in front of me.
And certain parameters that you've put
Right.
of goals for the particular project.
Yeah, or circumstances within which I want to work, whether it's a set of materials, a group of images I might want, or references I might want to
Mm.
bounce my drawings off of. And so there's different sets. Some of it might be a paper size I want to work with, or a change in scale. Different things can trigger my way in initially, but once it gets set up, I'm just sort of responding and improvising to the circumstances as they present themselves.
Right. And I'd imagine chemical processes at this point. You have so many different materials that you could work with that interact differently, and probably sometimes
totally.
with surprising results, I'd imagine.
Yeah. I mean, that's, every painting is a kind of laminated structure. So they're built, how they're built and how the color is sequence affects the way they look. And how they look is what they mean.
Mm.
It's all sort of interwoven as a single text in a way.
Mm. That's fantastic. You mentioned Ligeti, Georgi Ligeti, as an influence, and you have this painting called Clocks and Clouds. Is there an analogy in the way the music brought to you to?
Well, I just like that idea, which I think Ligeti got from Karl Popper, the kind of theoretician, that there are two kinds of structures: cloud structures or clock structures, one being mechanistic and one being sort of chaotic, and more easily described now through chaos theory, but something that was more amorphous and difficult to compute, at least at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like that imagery of the clocks and clouds thing. And Ligeti was just someone I don't know, I sort of found my way to through a lot of interest in contemporary composing, and he made the most listenable music of so much of that genre of music. And his writing, I thought, really described the process of composition that was something I could respond to. He talked about that he felt his way forward from work to work in all different directions. And he likened it to like moving through a labyrinth, but not like a maze like labyrinth, like a classical labyrinth where there's one pathway to the end, but there might be lots of different circuits you could take. It kind of resonated with me in terms of how I'm trying to find my way through the process to the final image and the final composition of the work. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed very articulate to me in terms of how he described how he could set up a system that was essentially naive. He like this sort of naive musical idea, but he would inject all these like things that kind of could throw it off balance, and ultimately arrive at something that felt like his own in some new exploratory way.
it's interesting also in light of what you were saying a moment ago about improvisation, that Ligeti is a composer who, through various uses of time scale and representation on the page, allowed the individual players some
Mhm.
decision making, some agency in the process
Mhm.
that I hear as something very flowing and almost from science, from nature.
Yeah. Well, that's the goal in some sense.
Yeah.
Application of nature and its manner of operation. That's the sort of Kumaswami Indian philosopher.
Hmm. Clocks and clouds. That was an excerpt of Clocks and Clouds, Georgi Ligeti. Uh, Again, I'll remind people, this is a podcast, so it's an audio medium, and we're talking about Terry's painting and visual work. So you can go to terrywinters.org, and I recommend that you do. But the specific works that we're talking about here, you can also find on the podcast page at greenleafmusic.com. I listen to that piece and I really hear what I see in your work. So I sort of feel like the connections between musical art and visual art.
Well, it's nice to think that that's true. So I'm glad. The other aspect of that, which, of Ligeti that I responded to is this idea, his notion about polyphonic, like multiple sounds happening at once. And I
Yeah.
think that was something that an interest I developed in terms of the painting, of developing a complexity of color, where there was a multiplicity of color to each form that was based on these very small incremental changes. And I think that he was building something out of like very small units of sound that added up to something that was much more sort of flowing and melodic,
Yeah.
almost. So that was something that interests me a lot. That there's this attention to this precise attention to detail that added up to a larger composition that was much more wave-like and accessible.
Really true, and in a very sneaky way, and in a way
That's good.
represented by clouds and by cobwebs and collections of metronomes, and just this very imagistic world that he lived in, and I find that in all of his pieces. But I'm curious now. There's an image that you sent that's so great. It's basically an imaginary album cover,
Right.
for a Sun Ra album that you made not that long ago, right?
No, last year. And it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was initiated by John Corbett. Do you know if you know? Yeah,
From Chicago. Yeah.
from Chicago, because John has basically these Sun Ra archives, visual archives, and he and the German painter Albert Oehlen were organizing an exhibition and selecting a group of artists to make a kind of imaginary cover for an album, or a cover for an imaginary album, and I made that one, and it's
great.
It's also in my own smaller handwriting. It says the immeasurable equation.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of that phase gets back a little bit to the Ligeti thing too, about how they're based on it with an almost mathematical precision, but they're also so unimaginable, like the way they're put together. There's not a real logic. It's almost like a kind of Alice in Wonderland nonsense kind of way they're put together. And
some would argue that there is a logic in there, but anyway, go ahead.
No, well, yeah.
I'm sure that Mr. Ra would have.
Lewis Carroll would.
Yeah.
That notion of the immeasurable equation, all of like Sun Ra's music and his writing too. I think his poetry is just so extraordinary. The way he grafted a kind of language onto the magical quality of his music.
Yeah, and you knew his music pretty well, right?
I mean, fairly well. I mean, I'm not a student of it, but I had really early exposure. Actually, the first time I saw him was a teacher had brought him to School of Visual Arts. I had been visiting a friend of mine there, and he played in the auditorium at the School of Visual Arts, the orchestra.
Wow.
And it must have been when they were living in New York, I guess. And soon after that, I had, when I was at Pratt, I with a couple of my friends from school days, we started a construction company called Walls. And where we did construction, sort of downtown loft construction was the idea. And the first job, we posted stuff in the Village Voice, ads in the Village Voice and around town. And the first job we got was from Slugs. And someone had gone to the backyard at Slugs and broken through their brick wall.
Wow.
It was like incredible. Like the whole back of the building was taken out.
This was the club it was in the
East 3rd Street or something. Way east.
And what year would this have been?
I was trying to think.
Like mid-70s?
71?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Somewhere in there.
Wow.
Anyway, they had this big hole in the wall. They needed to get it done fast. So they hired us. And I just remember mixing up all this concrete in freezing cold weather, putting back the brick wall together.
To fix Slugs.
Fix Slugs.
Did you work at Slugs then after?
But no, I worked for them for that one particular job, but then kind of discovered the place. And it was at a point where Sun Ra and the orchestra had a regular gig there. I think it was like every Monday night they played. It was really sort of where I got to hear them up front, personal.
Great. I'm going to play a little bit of The Magic City. So you heard Sun Ra at Slugs. You must have gone to a lot of places to hear music at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in New York. I went to the Vanguard and Cafe A Go Go, so lots of great, great music early on.
Fillmore, did you go to?
Yeah, the Fillmore East. That was quite active when I was
Wow.
downtown.
So again, this is like mid 70s. So you must have heard
Yeah,
Ornette and Miles and.
yeah. I mean, I had a place on Green Street when I was at
Hmm.
Pratt. It was right on Prince Street,
Wow.
and for a period of time, I had a temporary studio on the Bowery, and Ornette was upstairs as used as rehearsal space. So every afternoon, I kind of heard them working out.
And you were painting
Yeah,
when you weren't making walls. You were
exactly.
painting.
Yeah, that was yeah. It was post Walls days.
I visited your place. It's in Columbia County.
Yeah. But did you ever come to White Street? To my place on White
I
Street?
think I might have visited you on White Street once when we first started working together.
Yeah. So I had been in Tribeca for many, many years.
Uh huh.
And about 3 years ago, we kind of shifted the center of gravity up here in Columbia County.
It's an incredible place that you have. And the way the work is laid out is so reminiscent of the way that you talk about the process.
Very conducive to making it happen.
Well, all sorts of pieces in various states of unfinishedness.
Exactly.
And it's
Exactly.
great. It's great to see it come alive. Um, I read an interview where you said, and it's one of my favorite lines, I say it all the time and I always get busted on it, but you said, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think I know what you mean.
In the larger sense, I don't know. So that's why I've been really interested in designing parameters within which I can allow myself to explore and give myself permission to investigate, test, and play with these unknown qualities that drive me to make this stuff. I'm interested in having a kind of structure within which to allow these unknowns to exist.
Right. Right. Which is a luxury to not know what you're doing, really. I mean, on a, I don't even know on what basis. I mean, when I say it about myself, I mean that when I go to the place where I'm actually visiting, making the work, I'm going into a space where I relinquish all decisions about what it should be and what I've been taught and what it's made of.
Yeah, I guess that's the job description.
That's what you mean?
Well, ultimately, I mean, I'd say this thing about, painting is a combination of carpentry and catastrophe. That, like, I have a very enormous uh, enthusiasm for art materials, art supplies, the craft of the process.
Yeah.
just love it. I love all that stuff. And I can indulge myself and continue to work in a certain way where those qualities proceed in a workmanlike, carpentry-like way. But at a certain point, that carpentry has to hit the catastrophe where one is really far from equilibrium, and you have to reach to some place that you don't know about in order to get back an image that is different from those that you already know. And that combination of allowing the craft to push you further along, but past the point of what you know, to a place that's necessarily uncomfortable, it is kind of the job description. And it's sort of that sense or that quality is something I feel I recognize in other people's work that I've gotten a lot of nutrition from, and it's something that I'm kind of reaching for and to feel in my own work.
Wow. You find you have to push yourself into that place at times?
Yeah, because who wants to go there? I mean, or you set up the machinery in order to push yourself there, and then enjoy the ride. I mean, imagine, that's part of the admiration I have for musicians and working in real time in front of people in the moment. The kind of confidence of how things build. I mean, obviously, when you're painting, you can just sort of stop and fool yourself into doing something else or backing off in some way, but there's no backing off for you guys. It's kind of amazing.
Once we're up there, yeah, there's no backing off. Yes, true.
Matisse used to say that every time he worked on a painting, it was like a session. Like he didn't know how many sessions it would take for a painting to be finished. So it is something like a recording session or something, that an engagement with the process of working on the painting. And when you come back to it, you're dealing with a situation that's there. It's not as if you're moving forward in some logical carpentry-like way. You have to push and pull things to some other place.
But don't you think that your interior, I don't want to say subconscious, but you're thinking about the piece and your feeling about the piece may have changed if a few days have gone by, let's say.
Oh, no, totally. That's another layer of the qualities that get built into the work, whether it's changes of material, it's the different emotional states, it's the different conceptual changes and adjustments that get made. It's a multi-dimensional image that's being built over time on a flat surface.
Yeah.
So the picture plane ends up containing multiple time sequences. And that's read in one viewing, really, by the viewer, or it's taken apart over time by the viewer.
When you're working on one of these series, is there a certain is there a burn rate? Is there a for you in general, like let's say you're carrying along, you have maybe 30 different images in a series. Do some of them you decide along the way, okay, this one is out, I'm letting this one go?
I try to push them as far as I can to some new narrative. I think, early on in my working this way, I used to think, oh man, I fucked this one up. But now I realize there is no fucking up. There's just an indication that you need to push things in some other way or in some other direction. Maybe it's a little bit of like, did Miles say that there's no wrong notes? It's because you can change it by the next note, and that there's there are no cul-de-sacs that you just need to then change. It's an indication that you need to change direction.
Right. But your instinct is to carry them all to completion.
That's the hope. I mean, sometimes I rarely lose a painting in the physical object of it, because whatever history all of those false starts take or accumulate into is part of the narrative of the surface. And that surface helps tell the story of the painting itself.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. I also there are things that get lost, but once the thing has traveled a certain way down the road, it's not going back.
I'm lately of the belief and hope that it'll pop up somewhere else where it belongs. Like because you definitely things get buried of things. Usually, they're the things I've loved the most in the painting because I've held on to them for too long, and whatever that quality was that I loved about that section of the picture or something, I think will find its way back in a more appropriate way. Or that's what I've convinced myself of lately.
Well, and I'm sure you've observed it. You wouldn't think that if you hadn't seen it happen.
Well, there is self delusion.
Okay, one more question, and this is a common one that we composers get a lot. And the most basic way of phrasing it is, how do you know when the piece is done? And I guess I would phrase it more to ask you, after all of this discussion that we've had, is there a point in this, what did you call the lamination?
Laminated structure.
Laminated structure where you feel like, okay, now this is the final part of the process, and this one last touch, this gets it finished.
It's more back to that thing I said about the push and the pull of being pulled along by the painting. Like when I'm working, I'm connected to the imagery through some, chord of anxiety, of need, of irritation.
Right.
That
it's not finished.
And that there's something that needs attention or something that feels right. And those manifest themselves in multiple different ways through the process of building the picture.
Yeah.
At a certain point, I don't feel that anymore, and I'm outside the picture, and it has an existence of its own that I can't get back into.
Wow, that's great. Wow, I really like that.
It's the way I've been trying to understand that combination of being how much pleasure it is to work, from, like, just because of considering how we get to spend our days of doing this.
Yeah.
And that coupled with the enormous discomfort of working, like, it's just like, that's also a part of it. Just the difficulty of pushing things along, this weird combination of both those things. That's another de Kooning thing. Like his only interest in desperation is that sometimes he finds himself so desperate, and that like sometimes it's just like, I'm desperate to get this thing to feel better.
Yeah, yeah.
And that combination ends up getting me somewhere. So I'm, that's ultimately more rewarding, more nutritional, more engaging for me.
And I'd imagine, like what you said about carpentry, that just engagement with the materials, the items of the craft, the physicality of working with those elements,
I mean,
is somehow soothing, right? It's like a part of the making of the thing.
Yeah, like the sound for you,
Right. If I'm scoring, rulers and pencils and erasers and
And just the existing inside the activity. I mean, painting has such a long historic tradition, and there's something about trying to say something inside that tradition that might be of interest or further the conversation somewhat. I think that's so much of what I liked about people like Sun Ra, or something like these guys who are working with such classical instruments. The idea of how you can get this instrument to produce new kind of sounds, new combinations of material, new kind of vibrational forces at work. And just that exploratory nature within the confines of a very subscribed space interests me a lot. Like that Magic City piece. I mean, I've been listening to it since we talked more. And you just think about it, Magic City is, Birmingham, where he grew up. It's a nickname of Birmingham. But when you think of so could it be about Birmingham, this piece of music? And then you think about like what that composition is. It's like complete, inspired madness. It's like, the city is the cosmos. He's got so many different kinds of composition in there, so many different kinds of musical sounds, some new electronic sounds early on, combined with like very classical instruments. That nature of invention kind of interests me.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
I hope that my questioning was adequate. I'm, thinking back that we got to actually work together. I'm really happy that ever happened. And every time I'm in contact with your work, it's incredibly inspiring, and that it keeps shifting and changing. It's really, it's wonderful to see, and I hope I get to visit you.
Likewise. I know, because you're right on the way up here. We pass your town.
I'm on the way up, but it's still, you're
further up.
I'm sure I'll get up there again, Terry.
Anytime, open invitation.
Well, thank you. Thanks so
I'll
much.
definitely get to see you in the city at some point, because I know you got a couple of gigs coming up.
Well, the Trisha Brown Company did mount a few years back now, but they did the third part of the trilogy at the Joyce Theater, and we got to sit next to each other, and it was to sit there and hear the recording that we made of it back in the day, and to just be able to relax. But it was beautiful to see it. The images, the dance, the music was quite a piece. And actually, I'm going to play Prairie from Groove and Counter Move on the way out. But I'll just say thank you so much.
Hey, good to see you, Dave.
Great to see you.
Onward.
Always.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Terry Winters. As always, you can get all of these episodes at greenleafmusic.com, become a subscriber, get the entire catalog, or just enjoy the podcasts. Thanks for listening. This is Dave Douglas. See you soon.